Jong-Fast and Axios national politics reporter Sophia Cai. Welcome to you both. Molly, there's a huge amount of soul searching going on among Democrats about the low Democratic turnout on Election Day, by the shift of traditionally Democratic voters switching to the GOP. Top of mind, what is your big takeaway from this election?
You know, there's a lot of soul searching, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of people mad at each other. But I would say that considering the incumbency headwinds and considering that Harris was running for president for for a couple months, she did an amazing job. And you can see the strength of that in the down ballot races, right? The Senate seats that Democrats were able to keep. I mean, incredible stuff, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada. So I do think there certainly is going to be a lot of soul searching and a lot of, thinking and talking and postmortems. But I do think she did help all those down ballot races, and that is incredibly meaningful.
Sophia, all this, though, despite Trump making gains with Black, Hispanic, Asian voters, even in deep blue places like right here in New York City. This is in spite of all of his racist and xenophobic messaging. How do you explain Democrats not seeing this shift in the non-white and working class voters to Trump? Has the GOP base shifted to a more diverse coalition of voters?
Yeah, I think the numbers speak to themselves. And, behind all of his racist comments and, all of his other shenanigans, he has actually campaigned in some fairly diverse places like South Bronx. He's gone to Coachella, California. And I was at his Bronx rally earlier this cycle, and I asked a Black hairdresser, I said, do you not see him as racist? And she said, look, he's equally racist to everybody. I think it's just not something that everybody votes on. And if you're the Trump campaign, I know very early on, his campaign managers were very focused on getting what they were hoping to be marginal gains with Black and Latino men, specifically in places like Philly and Detroit and Milwaukee, in order to make up for any losses in the suburbs. And I think that's exactly what you did. If you look at why did he go to California? Why did he go to, New York, New Jersey? It is to find the majority minority crowds.
So, Molly, as you were saying, there's plenty of blame to go around for Harris's loss. Charlemagne the God is among those who are saying, like you did, that Harris ran a great campaign under the circumstances she was given. But in terms of finger pointing, what are the most notable ones right now that you're seeing that you think may be able to be used as lessons for the Democrats?
Well, I think the biggest one, and this has not gotten as much attention. I mean, there's certainly, everybody is using this to explain their priors, right? So if you were a person who thought the party was too far left, you now have decided that that is the answer. And if you were a person who thought the party was too far right, you're now using that as the answer. But a thing that people, I'm not sure, are talking about quite enough is the ability to underestimate Trump, right? I mean, this guy has run ahead of the polls now in 3 elections. Even in 2020, where he lost, he still ran ahead of the polls. So in some ways, I think, in my mind, that's the biggest takeaway. I'm not sure that the things that Trump can do can be replicated by the rest of the Republican Party. In fact, we've seen, if you look at someone like Carrie Lake, that they can't be, right? Carrie Lake loses in a state that Trump wins. So I do think some of this is unique to Trump, which is important before Democrats decide to completely redo their whole policy platform. I do, but I also think that there will be a lot in the coming days that we'll see with that.
Yeah, it is likely, Sophia, that Republicans are going to maintain control of the House and that they will then have a unified government in Washington. But the GOP's likely paper-thin House majority means it is going to be extraordinarily difficult for Speaker Mike Johnson to pass their agenda, considering the chaos and the internal conflicts that have plagued this Republican-led House. But does that change, and this is really building off of Molly's last point there, with Trump in the White House?
Look, Trump is able to tank a legislation simply with a Truth Social post. I mean, that is the reality. He has Republican leaders, likely leaders on both sides, who are a lot more Trump friendly. He has more ideologically aligned senators. And in terms of, if they get control of the House, look, they're going to have more funding for things such as those mass deportations, more money for ICE, expansions of ICE. They might potentially restructure the Affordable Care Act. I mean, you go down the list, there's a lot that they can do with more ease. I mean, still, you've got these characters in the House, and Mike Johnson will continue to have to wrangle them. But, Mike Johnson and Trump, they've found a way to sort of coexist, and they've worked on their relationship. I think there's just a lot more that you can do with, Trump sums it up himself. He said that last time around, he knew nobody in Washington. He didn't know how it worked. And in a recent interview, he said, look, I know everybody. I can dial up anyone.
So then, Molly, what are your greatest concerns and fears about a second Trump administration?
Yeah, I have a lot. I mean, I would say the number one thing has to be to protect the norms and the guardrails, to make sure that that the institutions hold, right? That the courts and the law still work, that we have free and fair elections, that the DOJ is not completely taken over by the admin. I mean, these are things that are really, really, really important. And we're going to have to see. I think it's quite scary. The one bit of good news, I would say, in this is that they had a majority in the House, Republicans, the last 2 years, and they really had a difficult time passing stuff, because as ideologically in agreement as this group is, there are a lot of personalities, and they are rewarded for being personalities and not necessarily for passing legislation. So I do